Shrouded in grey, this valley in Tuzla in Bosnia may look pretty from a distance, but the people who live here describe the smog-filled air from the nearby coal-fired power plant as a living hell.
Everything that's captured by the filters of the plant is mixed with water and then transported by the pipes there, and it poses a threat to the population.
A study by the Brussels-based Health and Environment Alliance last year estimated that air pollution in the Western Balkans could cost as much as $9 billion a year in health problems. But other parts of the world, such as the US, have seen a dramatic reversal in carbon emissions. The International Energy Agency says carbon output there dropped to its lowest level since 1992 last year. That's despite the economy growing by 80% over that period. And the agency says that progress in the US has helped keep global emissions stable for the last 3 years, even while the world's economy expanded by more than 3%. Since 2010, it says the growth in emissions and the economy have diverged significantly.
In 2010, coal pollution was killing more than 13,000 Americans each year. And today, the statistics say that number is down to 7,000. Meanwhile, the drop in coal power is the biggest reason why the U.S. has led the world in reducing carbon emissions.
And even though scenes of wind farms like these in North Dakota are becoming increasingly familiar around the U.S., the administration of President Donald Trump has a new plan. He says environmental regulations put in place by his predecessor have hurt the economy and jobs.
We're setting up a task force in every federal agency to identify and remove any regulation that undermines American auto production and any other kind of production.
As the US pivots away from its environmental leadership role, it's being replaced by, of all places, China. To help combat crippling smog in its big cities, coal consumption has fallen for the last 3 years. It's become the world's top producer of solar panels, and it's embarked on a $474 billion renewable energy program, with huge wind and solar farms being built across the country. Trump has announced cuts of more than $10 billion to the agencies that have led the fight against global climate change. That battle is likely to become even harder without the US pulling its weight. Azhar Surki, TRT World.
And Azhar joins us on set now. There was a hint in your package there, your report, that economic growth doesn't have to be accompanied by commensurate amounts of growth in emissions. So you can have one without the other.
It's increasingly looking like that. I mean, when you look at the market forces that are driving the renewable energy market these days, it's reaching a tipping point where it's reaching a critical mass where the market forces are generating enough of a market for companies to thrive in. Profits are still very weak among companies that operate in that space, but the conditions are getting there. The economic conditions are getting there. Don't forget, for quite some years now, a lot of countries like Germany in particular have been ploughing billions of dollars, and the UK, into subsidies to prop up the renewable energy industry. Those subsidies are now coming off, and the people in the industry are now starting to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So once you have those kinds of conditions, you reach a stage where, yes, you're right, you can start to have growth without necessarily having this huge amount of emissions that normally accompany growth.
Right. Now, China is still by far the world's largest emitter of greenhouse gases, unless you look at it on a per capita basis, right, and then it isn't suddenly.
Right.
But in your report, you were mentioning how it's actually taking the lead. Is it seeing the benefits both financially and reputationally?
Oh, very much so. Let's take that second point first in terms of taking this lead on in terms of the moral high ground, if you want to call it that. Now that Donald Trump has kind of taken a step back and said, you know, we're prioritizing growth and the old-fashioned auto industry and heavy industry, and actually taking away a lot of the environmental regulations that Obama put in, that creates a vacuum in terms of the fight against global climate change. And that is something that China has been all too happy to step into, because that also gives them an enormous amount of stature on the global stage. And then, of course, there are the economic benefits as well. As I mentioned there, it's created, the world's largest solar panel industry. It's able to churn these out in such volume that the unit price of solar panels has plummeted.
OK. Azhar, thank you so much for the